Hello students. As you know, last time we were talking about depth perception, and we had discussed that there are two types of signals or cues for depth perception. One are the monocular cues, another are the binocular cues. This we had discussed last time. And we had discussed about monocular cues in the last video, and different monocular cues, as you all know, is relative size or size of the image, then interposition, then linear perspective, then light and shade, then clearness or clarity of details. Then we had discussed one more cue, which is accommodation, for which I had told that we'll discuss this point again. And then some more cues of depth perception are motion parallax or relative motion and atmospheric perspective. So among these we had discussed all of the cues, and now we'll be discussing last two cues of depth perception, that is monocular cues of depth perception. So two cues were left which we will discuss about. So first is the motion parallax or relative motion. So this relative motion or motion parallax is also found to be a very good signal for depth perception. That is, it can tell us about the distance of objects from us. So and it depends upon relative motion between us and the objects. So in our stationary position, we perceive fast moving objects as being closer than slow moving objects. So when we are stationary ourselves, but other things are moving, so fast moving objects, whatever they are, some vehicles and all which are moving with a high speed, they are perceived as fast, they are perceived to be closer than slow moving ones. And the slow moving objects or slow moving vehicles, they are perceived to be at a distance. So this is how our position and the motion of other objects affect the our monocular cue of depth perception. That is, some are perceived closer based on their motion, and some are perceived as distant. Then in case we are riding in a train or car or bus, it is noticed that nearby poles, trees, mountains, etc. are perceived to be moving rapidly and in opposite direction. Now it is since we have called it motion parallax or relative motion, when we are stationary, we perceive the depth or distance through the motion of other objects, and when we ourselves are moving but other objects are stationary, then we perceive their distance in a different manner. Like when we are riding or traveling through a car, train or a bus, then what happens is the objects which are near to the vehicle, they seem to be moving very fast in an opposite direction. So this is when we ourselves are sitting in a moving vehicle. The distant objects are found to be moving slowly in our own direction. So the nearby objects, they are seen to be moving very fast and in opposite direction, and the distant objects are found to be moving slowly in our own direction. And the objects which are moving slowly in our own direction are perceived to be distant. So this is how the relative motion between us and the objects around us, that makes us know the distance between us and them. This is how it works. Then is the atmospheric perspective. Atmospheric perspective says the distant trees, houses, mountains, etc. seem to be dim, unclear, and bluish in nature. So when we look around, the trees which are very far from us, the houses, the mountains, they seem to be very dim, very dull, and not the details are not clear and somewhat bluish. The mountains which are near to us, they seem to be brown or green, depending upon the color of the grass, but those which are far from us, they seem to be blue in color due to the atmospheric particles or various um, particles suspended in the air. So जितना दूर होंगी कोई भी चीज़ तो उसके थ्रू हमें उस एयर के थ्रू जब हम देखेंगे उनको तो the color of these objects will be changed to dim or bluish as such. So it gives us the signal of distance. The nearer objects in the atmosphere look clearer and brighter, whereas the objects which are near seem to be clear and bright. So we can see a close object clearly and its color is bright, whereas the objects which are far from us, they are seen as dim and bluish in color. So this is how it works. Then there was a point, this accommodation, which we had already discussed, but I would like to discuss it again as I mentioned in the last video also. And before that, I would like to mention one more thing, that this depth perception cue, which we are discussing under monocular signal or cue for depth perception, it can be put even in the binocular section also, because this works for both eyes. Like even a person who is capable of just seeing with one eye, for him also it works, and for normal person viewing through both the eyes it works. So it can be put there also. So it's better that we discuss it in the binocular section. So this finishes the cues of depth perception of monocular type. Then we'll talk about some binocular cues. So monocular cues are those cues which are possible through even a single eye, and binocular cues of depth perception are those which are possible only through the use of both the eyes. So the first binocular cue is retinal disparity. Now what does this retinal disparity mean? There is a small distance between our two eyes, which makes it possible for us to get an idea about the distance or depth of objects. So because the distance between them, because of the distance between the two eyes, each eye gets different picture of the same object or situation. The right eye, for instance, sees the right side of things little more than the left eye does. On the other hand, the left eye sees the left side of the object a little better than the right eye does. This difference in views is referred as retinal disparity. Because of the retinal disparity, each eye is able to view an object with in a better manner depending upon its left eye or right eye, as we have earlier spoken. And then the images made on two eyes, since they give two different views, when two views are compounded to form perception of a single scene or object, the difference in the overlap between the two views provide us with a sensation of depth. Since each eye, that is left eye and right eye, both eyes make their own images. Right eye can see the right side of the thing or an object or a scene in a better manner, and left eye sees the left side of the scene or object in a better manner, and this way the images are formed in both the eyes individually. And later, since we don't have to see two images for a single object, so what our eyes do, both the images are compounded in our brain, and then single image is formed. But because of this retinal disparity, which we have already spoken about, that is the um, better view by each eye, depending upon being its left or right in nature, there is some kind of cue which is left for the perception of distance or depth. So this retinal disparity gives us a cue for distance or depth. So it's a binocular cue because both eyes make different images. When the images compound to make a single image, that cue is provided to us. Then second is convergence. Now convergence is another important binocular cue, which means movement of eye towards each other, towards the center. Okay, the pupil of the eye, when it moves towards the center or towards the like how can I tell you, convergence means when we look at some object, our eyes, they converge. In convergence means our pupil movement of the pupil towards our, say we can say it towards our nose, in a simple manner if you want to understand this. So that is what convergence means it's like meeting of two eyes. They come very close, the pupil comes very close to each other. So what happens is eyes converge more when we fix them at nearby objects, than when we fixate on those that are at a distance. The eyes turn inward or converge when we look at nearby objects, and when we fixate objects farther away, the lines of vision of eye tend to be almost parallel. So convergence means movement of eyes, inward movement of eyes simply. Okay, so when we look at an object which is very near to us, eyes converge more, and when we see an object which is distant from us, eyes tend to be almost parallel. So that gives us an idea. This becomes a cue for the distance, that when our eyes converge more, that means that object is closer to us, and when our eyes converge less, or they are parallel to each other, then we can say that object is farther from us. So this is an important binocular cue for distance or depth perception. Then here we will discuss the last point, accommodation, which I've spoken earlier also, that this can be put in both the sections, but let's put it in this binocular cue section only. Accommodation means it is the adjustment of the shape of the lens of the eye in order to bring an image into focus on the retina. Now this accommodation is made by ciliary muscles, which are attached to the lens and allow it to bulge when they contract, thus accommodating near objects. The lens of the eye changes its curvature as we fixate on nearby objects and far away objects. It becomes flat when focusing on distant objects and assumes a convex shape when focusing on nearer objects. So we are not aware of these changes in the curvature of the lens, but this information, the movement of the muscles generate an information which is sent to the brain as a cue of distance. So this is what is meant by accommodation, that when we look at the nearby objects, the lens, in order to focus itself better, it becomes little bulging and thick, and the muscles controlling that lens, which are the ciliary muscles, they get contracted. And on the other hand, when something which is at a distance is looked at by us, the um, ciliary muscles, they relax or they expand, and as a result of that, the lens also is stretched, or the lens becomes thinner, and so that it can focus in a better manner. So the movement or the strain of muscles which is occurring here on the ciliary muscles due to the nearness or distance of an object, due to the adjustment of lens through ciliary muscles, gives us a good cue of depth perception. So this is what is meant by accommodation. So these are some of the cues of depth perception, in which we have discussed two types of cues, that is binocular cue and monocular cue. And there's a summation effect in this, in the perception of depth, which means that the effect of all, or the signal which we get from monocular as well as the binocular cues, they all combine together, and then it is decided whether the object is near or far away from us. So this is how it works. So this was there in your third unit. So that way we have finished the third unit. And as I'd told you earlier also, that the second unit is about perception. So you go through it yourself, as you have done all the things in your previous class, that is in first year. And in case of any problem or anything which you need to discuss, we can discuss it again also. So with this, your 3 units are completed in a way, and we'll see I'll see you in next video with a different unit or different topic. Put your attendance as usual in the comment box, and we can have an interactive session also someday, so that in case of your some queries or some problems, we can be face to face. So thank you, students.